In this video, we're going to talk about making friendly equations. Those are equations that will be very easy to solve either in your head, mentally, or requiring little steps. And those are really the best equations because they have a high rate of accuracy, meaning we can get them right pretty much all the time when they're easier, when we use them as basic facts. And they're also a lot quicker for us to solve. So think about equations that are friendly. We know multiplying any number times 10 is usually pretty easy because it's times 1 with a 0 on the end. Any number times 2 is usually easy because our doubles are a lot easier for us to do mentally. Numbers times 100 because it follows the same rule as 10, and all multiples of 10 are easy for us to solve. Any number that requires basic multiplication facts, those are much easier for us to solve because we should have our basic multiplication facts memorized already. So these are the things that we're going to be relying on when we talk about making equations that are friendly. So let's start with an example with the number 16. Okay, first of all, 16, even though it's not a basic fact because it is a double-digit number, it's larger than 12, most of us only have up to our 12s memorized, but we can make 16 feel like a basic fact. Okay, obviously, I should be able to easily solve 16 times 10. Well, I've got 16 times 1, which is 16, and it's a multiple of 10, so I've got 1 0 on the end. With that being said, 16 times 100 is also really simple because of the same reason. It's 16 times 1, but it's not just times 1, it's times 100, so my answer has to be in the hundreds place with my 2 zeros on the end of the number. Well, let's think about doubles. That's what I'm going to rely on are my doubles. How can I easily double 16? Well, that means I've got 10 twice and 6 twice. And these are usually pretty easy to do in my head, but I'm going to write them out so you can see what I'm thinking about. I know double 10 is 20 and double 6 is 12. And when I add those together, I get 32. And the more practice that you get, you should be able to be a lot quicker with your doubles as you continue to work towards making friendly equations. So I found 3 equations. Obviously, thousands would be another good one to start with. Tens of thousands if my number were that large. But right now, I'm just looking at tens, hundreds, and doubles. This is pretty limiting, though, because if I'm talking about wanting to multiply 16 times 7, none of these facts really help me so far. But when we're using friendly equations, we need to use the equations that we do know, like 16 times 10, and create other equations from them. What I mean is, if I have 10 groups, I can cut those 10 groups in half. And if I cut 10 groups in half, I'm left with 5 groups. So, if my total in 10 groups is 160, what's my total in 5 groups? Well, if I cut the groups in half, then my answer must be cut in half. And half of 160 is 80. How can I tell? Half of 16 is 8, and it's got a 0 on the end. So right there, I could easily solve 16 times 5 because I know 16 times 10, just by cutting my answer in half. Now, I'm able to solve more obscure problems, maybe even mentally or a little bit easier. 16 times 7, whereas before I might have to break apart 10 and 6 and solve. Well, now I know that 16 times 5 is 80, and I can use 16 times 2, which is 32, and just add those two up together. 80 and 32, well, 80 plus 20 is 100, plus another 12 gives me 112. And of course, I could always write it out to the side if I was having a hard time thinking about that in my head. Same could apply for 16 times 6. Well, now I know 16 times 5 is 80, so all I have to do is add on another group of 16, which gives me 96. So now I'm able to solve multiplication problems that are not basic facts with relatively little amounts of work or even some of them mentally. Let's look at another example. Let's look at 35. Okay, we should know 35 doubled pretty easily. If I double 30, I get 60. Double 5, I get 10. 60 plus 10 is 70. And hopefully after a while, you'll just have those doubles memorized just like you would with smaller numbers. Okay, another fact that I would try after 35 times 2, hopefully you're thinking 35 times 10, which would give me 350. 35 times 100 would give me 3,500 because it's 35 times 1 with 2 zeros on the end. Now, I'm going to use my 10 and make 5. So how do I know what 35 times 5 is? Well, 35 doesn't cut in half as easily as 16 did. But so then I can break it apart even farther. I can think of what's half of 300. Well, half of 300 is 150. And half of 50 is 25. And 150 plus 25 would be 175. So now I found 35 times 5 just by thinking about these numbers and their relationships. I could also find 35 times 7 again. Well, I know 35 times 2 is 70, and 35 times 5 is 175. So when I combine 2 and 5, I get 7. So I'm going to combine their answers. 175 plus 70. This might be one that you would want to line up. And I'm left with 245. Now, I don't just have to find 7s and 5s and doubles and 10s and hundreds. I can find any combination of them. If I know 35 times 2, I could find 35 times 3 by adding 70 plus 35 and getting 105. I could also find 35 times 110 really easily by adding my equation to 35 times 10 and 35 times 100. So I can break up basic facts like 35 times 10 by cutting it in half to make equations with answers that I might not normally know and make it a lot easier. Let's try one more example, 24. Okay, first I'm going to think of my doubles. 24 times 2. If I double 20, I get 40. Double 4, I get 8. Add them together, that's 48. I know 24 times 10 very easily because that's 24 times 1, which is 24, and it's a multiple of 10, so there's 1 0 on the end. How could I find 24 times 20? Well, I know 24 times 2 is 48, and it's got 1 0 on the end, so 24 times 20 is 480. I always want to find the 5s. I can easily find 5s because I know 10s. Now, I know that half of 240 would be 120. So now I found 24 times 5. Now, I'm going to use some of these equations that I have here to make some new equations. So first, I'm thinking I want to combine 24 times 10 and 24 times 5. That will give me the answer to 24 times 10 and 5, which would be 15. All I have to do is add 240 and 120. And when I add those up, I get 360. So instead of having to break apart 24 times 15 and make 4 separate equations and then add them up, I'm able to solve by adding 2 equations together, both of which were solved pretty easily using mental math and thinking about the numbers and their relationships. What I will encourage you to do is to continue to look for number combinations that you can make based off of facts that you already know. Facts that we easily know, just to review, would be think about your doubles. Okay, another one to think about would be multiplying by tens, hundreds. Basically, we would call these our multiples of 10. And then combining your basic or mental facts, like knowing your doubles and then adding one more to make times 3. And lastly, I'm always going to encourage you to use your tens to make multiplication facts times 5 by cutting the answer in half. So I hope that you will think about different ways that you can new numbers and make new facts that are easily solved in your head to help you to continue making multiplication equations and making it easier on yourself. So, cutting the answer in half. Good luck!